Hello and welcome to Silver Age Silver Screen, a podcast where we watch, discuss, and review film adaptations of comics, anime, video games, and other stereotypically geeky works. I'm your co-host, Casey Jarmes.
And I'm your other co-host, Riley Thorpe.
One of the nice things about comic books is that they've got so many villains who are... a lot of them are dumb and cheesy, but some of them are really cool. And some of them are both really cheesy and really cool. Why can't there be, comic books focusing on the villains? Because the villains are great. Or maybe even whole teams of villains. And, you can't just have a team about the main characters being dicks. So, maybe a team about anti-hero supervillains, trying to be better?
Yeah, perhaps.
Either by being forced by the government or through their own free will. That's a good idea. I wish someone had thought of that before me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No, it's a very, very common plot in comic books. A team of former villains who are now pseudo-heroes. You got things like Sinister Six, Superior Foes of Spider-Man, The Dark Avengers, Thunderbolts, Suicide Squad. There are a lot of teams that go in that sort of box. This show isn't just talking about comics, of course. We talk about films based on comics. And also anime and video games, but not really, because there aren't as many films about anime and video games, at least in the US.
Because most of them shit.
Well, that too. But there are films about this idea of teams of villains becoming heroes. DC has had an adaptation of the Suicide Squad, which was not great.
Terrible.
It was bad. It might be the worst... I was gonna say it might be the worst superhero movie that I've ever seen, and a month ago it was the worst, but now I have Captain America from the 90s giving it a fierce competition.
That's a great plug from last week's episode.
Yeah, you should go watch it. We talked about the movie where Captain America's a loser who destroyed the cure for polio. Anyway, DC, a few years back, they did a bad Suicide Squad movie. Then they did a spin-off sequel to it called Birds of Prey, which I didn't see. Was it good, Riley?
Not very good, no. It had its moments that were decent, but overall I'd say the movie was not too great.
And they're doing another Suicide Squad movie. This one called The Suicide Squad. And it has James Gunn as a director, so I'm torn because Suicide Squad has burned me twice now, but also James Gunn is really good at movies about superhero teams, so I don't know. On the Marvel side of things, there's nothing concrete, but for years there have been rumors about a Thunderbolts movie. Thunderbolts being the Marvel equivalent of the Suicide Squad.
From rumors that have leaked, and again, this is a spoiler warning, cut maybe a minute ahead if you don't want to hear spoilers, but the rumor that's been circulating the internet these days is that the post-credit scene for the Black Widow film that's coming hopefully next year will set up the Thunderbolts film. So we got that to look forward to.
Maybe.
Perhaps. Maybe. It's just rumors, but maybe.
Who knows? Getting back to the Suicide Squad talk, the Suicide Squad movies that we've had so far have been bad, and, we don't want to just sit here and critique and say we're better than everyone. Let's, discuss how we would make a Suicide Squad movie, or a Thunderbolts movie, or a Dark Avengers, or a Sinister Six, or whatever.
I'd be down for that.
Okay, dropping the intro where we pretend we don't know what we're talking about for a moment. About a week and a half ago, Riley pitched this idea to me, and I liked it. Basically, in this episode, we are going to be pitching 4 films to you. Each of us is going to be doing one Marvel and one DC movie. These films are going to be just our ideas on how we would make a movie about a team of villains becoming heroes. We didn't lay down much other rules, and we have not told each other our pitches.
Yeah, so pretty much all this is just we individually are making a film of a team of villains, and we are pitching our ideas to you tonight.
Yes. And we'll see how this goes. I'm excited. Riley volunteered to go first with his Marvel idea, and I'd like to see how this goes. Riley, I give you the floor.
Okay, sounds good. So here's my idea I would say this probably is more along the lines of the Cabal, who is a team of villains comprised of like the biggest supervillains in the Marvel Universe, in the same way that Tony Stark formed the Illuminati, made of the most powerful and influential superheroes in the Marvel Universe. So this isn't a Thunderbolts or a Dark Avengers. This is, I would say, a Cabal. So let me just start off by saying, before we get into this, my stories are completely non-canonical, so everything goes. The story picks up a few years into the future. Captain America, he's done with the Avengers, he's gotten a little bit older, he's retired the superhero world, the superhero role, and he has been elected the President of the United States. He has spent his entire life fighting for the United States of America, but now he is actively taking part in leading. Now, this also takes place in a world where the world's countries that are like the most powerful, basically the world's superpowers, each of them are predominantly run by super beings. The United States is run by Captain America. Doctor Doom is the dictator of Latveria. Namor is the king of Atlantis. T'Challa, Black Panther, is the king of Wakanda. And Eric Lensher, Magneto, is the leader of Genosha. And for those of you who don't know what Genosha is, it's an island that's a safe haven for mutant kind. Created by the X-Men villain Magneto, basically saying, we take you and you are welcome here because we accept you. Where else the rest of the world will not. The story sets up the 5 major powers of this new world, essentially, are run by superheroes and supervillains. So it's a bit more of a political thriller. So now, Casey, I ask you, have you ever heard of the Captain America villain, Flag Smasher?
I looked him up while I was doing research for my pitch on Marvel, and he just sounded like the dumbest Captain America villain ever, just that he's a Captain America villain named Flag Smasher. That's so on the nose.
Yeah, it really is.
I don't know much about him.
It really is terrible. The reason why you don't know much about him is because he's a D-lister at best. He is terrible. There was a Deadpool comic book recently where he was basically being hunted down, and at the end he found out that the person behind it was Flag Smasher, and Deadpool was like, "Are you fucking kidding me? It's a Captain America villain, and not even a cool one?" That's who's been messing with me this entire time. So, essentially, he's a lame as shit villain. Essentially, he's the polar opposite of Captain America. Whereas Captain America stands for patriotism and hope and always fighting for what's right, Flag Smasher is the most edgy, nihilistic, hateful, spiteful person you could ever imagine. There was a comic book panel I read while coming up with this idea. This might have been in the 80s or 70s, I think, where this happened, but he was like, "I hate America," or whatever, and someone asked him, like, "What are you, some kind of commie?" And he was like, "No, haven't you been listening to a word I've said? I hate what the Soviet Union stands for just as much as I hate what America stands for." And essentially, what he stands for, if you boil it down, he hates patriotism. He just wants chaos on this planet. He sees no point in anything. In my story, he's the central villain of this story because I like taking characters, predominantly villains, and just making them these really insanely important characters in a story. That's just what I like doing because I have a sick sense of humor. But Flag Smasher is the villain of this story. If you take what he is to its logical extreme, he's essentially the Joker from The Dark Knight. He just lives to create pure chaos. So Flag Smasher, he sees this political state that the world is in, how 5 major superpowers of this world are run by superheroes and villains, who most of them hate each other. Captain America, Black Panther are heroes. Namor is an anti-hero. Doctor Doom and Magneto are villains. And they all just have their individual grudges with each other. And there's a lot of political turmoil. So basically, Captain America is the president of the United States. Now he has to politically keep the peace between other nations that are being run by other superheroes and supervillains. Really what it is a soldier. He's finished with the fight, but now he's still doing his duty. But he's having to struggle with this idea of doing what's right for the American people, because that's what I love so much about, especially what I love so much about what the MCU has done with Captain America, but it's also a very difficult thing to get it particularly right with certain characters like Superman, Captain America, and I would probably even include Black Panther in this, just because as human beings, they're basically the best version of themselves they possibly can be. They know what's right. They know good from evil. And it's like, there's not very much they have to learn. In the same way like Iron Man, he's constantly messing up. He's constantly having to fix his mistakes, and he's constantly learning. Captain America already knows right from wrong. There's nothing you can really do in that way. What makes stories about these characters interesting is they put that ideology to the test. They show an internal struggle. And so essentially, we find a world about to erupt in World War whatever, because superheroes and supervillains are essentially the political leaders in this world. And here's Flag Smasher, who's in the middle of that, who despises all of that and hates all of them. He wants to just destroy that. So he creates a team of 5, including himself, villains, to go up against each of the major supervillains and superheroes of this world. His first major step is to create a powerful enough team that can withstand arguably the most powerful characters in the Marvel Universe. First, he enlists Molecule Man to go up against Doctor Doom. Molecule Man is one of, if not the most powerful villains in the Marvel Universe. His power is that he can turn anything into anything, and he can create anything he wants. He enlists Molecule Man saying, look, you hate this country's and all these people, you're a villain. They've imprisoned you, they've persecuted you, they've done all this. Help me fuck with them, essentially. And that's how he gets Molecule Man. So now, it's Flag Smasher with the plan, Molecule Man with the power. And he's going to send Molecule Man against Doctor Doom. Because Doctor Doom is so incredibly powerful, you need an incredibly powerful villain to go up against him. To go up against Namor, the villain Atuma, who's not too popular. Have you ever seen the Avengers Assembled animated show?
Oh god, like once or twice when I was like 10, I remember basically nothing about it.
Yeah, it's not that great. But Atuma is a villain featured in that show. He is an Atlantean-based character, and Molecule Man, he can create, say, a robot army or clone army or whatever. Essentially, Molecule Man will build an army with his power, and he'll give it to all these villains to essentially just wage war on whatever villain they're going up against. Up against Black Panther is the Shadow King, who has very deep, very influential, and very important to Storm's origin story. He's an African-based villain who probably has a personal grudge against Black Panther. He can battle Black Panther psychologically as opposed to physically. To go up against Magneto is the Man-Thing, who is Marvel's ripoff of the Swamp Thing. Basically, Man-Thing's ability is he lives in the Everglades, where he protects the portal to the multiverse, and anyone who is afraid of him, when he touches them, they explode. He's incredibly powerful. Like, he can walk into a swamp, and all, like, the vegetation and gunk and slime and stuff like that will come to him, and he will become this massive monster. And Magneto, he's weak against, like, natural elements, so he's a villain that Magneto won't have an easy time defeating. My Marvel villain team, my cabal, essentially, is comprised of Flag Smasher, Molecule Man, Atuma, the Shadow King, and the Man-Thing. Now, he convinces Shadow King, I don't know if I talked about this, because he has a personal vendetta against Black Panther, but he convinces Man-Thing by saying, look, the humans are destroying nature. They're going to destroy you eventually. Man-Thing is essentially very neutral in the affairs of good and evil, but in order to protect nature, which is, he essentially is nature, in order to protect himself and the nature of this world, he goes with these guys to destroy humanity, essentially, because all Flag Smasher wants is chaos. What this story is, it's a political thriller about a soldier, Captain America, Steve Rogers, a soldier who's quit the fight, but still doing his duty, finding himself caught in a world potentially a World War III type situation where the world's biggest superpowers are controlled by supervillains and superheroes who really do not get along. They hate each other. So he's trying to keep the peace with that. But here comes Flag Smasher, who now has the ability and the influence to create an army and go to war with all these countries. He's just trying to defeat them, to throw the entire world into chaos, and prove to Captain America that everything he believes in is just a fallacy. Captain America stands for patriotism, but when it gets down to it, people are just animals. There's no order to anything. It's all just chaos, and I'm essentially just doing that to fuck with you, Captain America. Basically, he's trying to bring about the apocalypse. But a D-list Captain America villain is trying to bring about the apocalypse, is what I'm saying. Essentially, that's what the entire story is Captain America struggling with this idea of him, like, can we defeat him? Can people who have so much hate against each other fight for a common interest? It's a very simple story. Well, not simple. It's a very short, relatively short story. Basically, all these countries are going to war with whatever, and at the end, in the United States, Atlantis, Wakanda, Genosha, the Avengers, the X-Men, all these countries band together to defeat Flag Smasher and his armies, and basically the heroes win the day. Except Doctor Doom defeats Molecule Man, siphons his powers to have them to use as his own because, of fucking course, Doctor Doom would do that. And the final battle is all the heroes and the villains of this world go up against Doctor Doom, who has the power to literally do anything. The heroes win, and Captain America is reassured that people are still capable of working together even if they hate each other, and we usher in a new era of peace in the planet Earth. And then Galactus comes and they eats them all. I don't know. No, that's a joke. That's my Marvel story. Captain America has to struggle with his beliefs. He is the president, so now he can't just fight. He has to use diplomacy, and he has to bring the world's heroes and villains together, all because these villains are banding together. And yes, I understand, it's not totally villain-centric, although I would say the story is about 50-50 split, about the villains banding together and their plan, but I would say, like, the main character is definitely Captain America. Not a villain, but he's dealing with all this. And Flag Smasher is genuinely proving a threat to him. That's my pitch idea for Marvel. Not the strongest, I admit, but, I mean, honestly, I got pretty into it, but I don't know. That's my idea.
Not bad, I like that. It is interesting, like, making a film that plays with the ramifications of all these countries are ran by superheroes, and that is a thing in Marvel Comics that they don't really go into the geopolitical implications of, but, like, if the leader of Wakanda and the leader of Latveria have gotten into a fist fight before, I feel like that would have big geopolitical implications.
Very much so, and that's what I wanted to explore with this story, is this idea. I think Captain America Civil War touched upon it, like, you superheroes are vigilantes. You're running around with no checks and balances, and not just that, now, these people that have no checks and balances, they're literally running the world at this point, which is essentially what would happen if there were superheroes. Like, okay, this guy can destroy the world if he wants to, so might as well do what he says.
Yeah, I like that.
Side note, I actually researched why Namor and Black Panther hate each other so much, and the big reason why that I found was because during the X-Men vs. Avengers event in the comics, 4 X-Men and Namor were imbued with the Phoenix Force. The Avengers were trying to stop them because they got too powerful, and in order to defeat them, Namor summoned the sea to destroy the Avengers, and they flooded the city that they were in. The problem is, that city was Wakanda. Thousands of Wakandans died because of Namor. Now, Black Panther and Namor hate each other, so...
I always thought it was just because they're both, especially in Namor's case, kind of like arrogant dicks, but
oh yeah,
sure,
that's probably it. They just, as people, do not get along. But the big reason that I found is because Namor, like, actively took Wakandan lives.
Yeah, I just imagine, like, them talking afterwards, like, listen, I understand that you are under mind control. It is fine that you destroyed Wakanda. Okay, that's good. And what? Are you going to say you're sorry? I'm not apologizing for shit. Say you're sorry or I am going to declare war. Namor doesn't apologize for killing people, which is why he needs to be the villain of Black Panther 2 if they're still doing that.
Yes. It should be either Namor or Doctor Doom. Predominantly Namor. I'd like to see that. But yeah, so that's my Marvel story.
I suppose I'll move on to mine, if that's all right.
Yeah, go right ahead.
So, unlike Riley, who's doing a free-form, like, anything from the comics thing, which I admittedly did for my DC one, I decided to put some restrictions on my Marvel pitch. This film must work in the MCU, it must only use pre-existing characters, and it must be a film that could come out tomorrow without breaking continuity. Like, ideally, if you want to make a Thunderbolts movie, you would introduce the villains over time, like, oh, it's going to feature Taskmaster, so we're making him the villain of Black Widow, and then in the next movie we'll introduce a new villain, and yada yada yada. But no, I'm going to only use pre-existing characters, which poses a problem, because Marvel movies usually kill their villains, but whatever, I found a way to work it. The film starts with a cold open. Famous actor Simon Williams, played by Nathan Fillion, is in New York filming a movie about Tony Stark. This is actually something that is kind of canon in the MCU. In Guardians of the Galaxy 2, there was a cameo of movie posters for the comic character Simon Williams, and all of them had Nathan Fillion on them, and one of them was a knockoff of the Steve Jobs movie poster, but with Nathan Fillion as Tony Stark. Anyway, while filming some shots outside the newly built Stark Tower, Loki opens a massive wormhole in the sky to outer space and summons an army of Chitauri, and then the Avengers happens. Williams is shot and gravely injured by the Chitauri. He lives, but is put on life support and is left unable to continue his acting career. Williams blames Stark and the Avengers for his injuries. Williams is approached by the evil organization AIM, who also hate Tony Stark. A lot of people in the MCU have the motivation of hating Tony Stark, admittedly. Anyway, AIM offers to do an experimental treatment on Simon Williams to heal him, but the experiment goes wrong. It turns Williams into a mass of living ionic energy. For his appearance, think the version from Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes, like where he's this bald dude just made out of purple gas with glowing red eyes. That's what I've been picturing.
Right.
Anyway, Williams loses control of his powers, accidentally killing the AIM scientists who experimented on, and maybe a few civilians if the film wants to be dark. S.H.I.E.L.D. shows up, takes him out, and shifts him to the Raft, a supervillain prison floating in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, which has showed up a few times in the MCU now. We then cut ahead 14 years to 2026. 3 years after the events of Avengers Endgame. We see a computer screen showing information on MCU villains, their abilities, their plans, etc. We then cut to Washington, D.C., where Secretary of State Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross is speaking before Congress about his plan for the Planetary Defense Shield, a series of U.S. military satellites that will protect the Earth from alien invasions. Which they kind of need, because Earth keeps getting invaded in the MCU. And the comics, really. Ross argues that, although the Avengers saved them from Thanos, their failure in the first place was what resulted in the death of billions, and that the world cannot rely on morally dubious vigilantes to protect it. He also points out that, even if the Avengers were perfect, they're kind of gone now. I mean, Iron Man's dead, Captain America's an old man, Hulk's missing an arm, Thor's chilling with the Guardians.
Yeah.
Right then, the Capitol Hill security system is hacked and a video starts playing, like projected in the Congress Hall. The video shows a man wearing a purple mask and a golden crown sitting on a throne. He says in a distorted voice that he is Hydra Commander Helmut Zemo, and that the time of the Avengers has ended. Armed Hydra agents break through the doors and start killing members of Congress. It's notable, these Hydra goons are wearing World War II-era outfits, with like all the black covering them and the face masks. And they aren't wielding guns. Each of the Hydra goons is wielding the weapons of a different MCU villain. For instance, one has Vanko's whips from Iron Man 2, one has Vulture's wings, one has Corvus Glaive's spear, etc. Commander Zemo introduces his minions as the Masters of Evil, an elite Hydra squad of enhanced supervillains. We also briefly see him, raise his hand as he's speaking, and you can see that he's wearing a golden gauntlet with a single orange gem in the center. James Rhodes, aka Iron Patriot, Avenger superhero, appeared a lot in the MCU, shows up to fight off the Hydra soldiers. And he gets his ass kicked. He managed to take out one of the Hydra goons, but the others beat the shit out of him. The Masters of Evil, having killed half of Congress and demonstrated their power, retreat. And then we get the title appearing, The Dark Avengers, because this is going to be a film dealing with what remains of the Avengers now that most of the team is gone, and the evils that the world must face. And you'll notice that I'm using the name The Dark Avengers, which is a thing in the comics that is basically an evil version of the Avengers made up of supervillains pretending to be the Avengers. For instance, they have Draken pretending to be Wolverine, and they have Bullseye pretending to be Hawkeye, and they have Green Goblin pretending to be Iron Man and Captain America at the same time by calling himself Iron Patriot, which they use the design and name of for War Machine in the MCU, but haven't introduced Norman Osborn. I'm going to be taking this idea of the Dark Avengers, like an evil version of the Avengers that looks like the normal team, but I'm going to be playing around with it. I think only a handful of the members are actually members in the comics, and trying to adapt it to fit the MCU. The goon that Iron Patriot took out is transported to the raft. Ross and Rhodes take a helicopter there, and while they're traveling, they have a discussion about the past of the Avengers. Rhodey points out that they defeated Hydra in 2015, and Ross points out that Captain America did the same thing in the 40s, and that Hydra just doesn't stay dead. Rhodes questions Ross about his planetary defense shield, pointing out that most aliens he's met are good, bringing up Thor and Nebula. Ross counters by bringing up Thanos and Loki. The duo arrive at the raft to question the captured Hydra goon, but he doesn't say anything. It is revealed that he is a US Special Ops soldier who went AWOL a few months ago. Before Rhodey can get any information out of the Hydra goon, the raft is attacked by the Masters of Evil. Overwhelmed, Rhodey is forced to free 2 prisoners from their cells to help him fight: Simon Williams and Ava Starr. To recap, Ava Starr, aka Ghost, was the main villain of the second Ant-Man movie, and I know you, Riley, aren't a big fan of the Ant-Man movies, but I kind of like them,
right.
And I like Ghost from them.
Right.
She had a sympathetic backstory and some really creative, cool fight scenes, which is why I want her in another movie.
Mm-hmm.
Star's backstory is that experiments by her scientist father messed up her molecules, giving her the ability to turn intangible, but also leaving her kinda half dead. She worked as a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent for a while before becoming a supervillain and fighting Ant-Man to steal some tech to save her life. Go watch Ant-Man and the Wasp if you want to understand this. At the end of that movie, the Pym family agreed to help cure her of her, dying. And then they all got stabbed away by Thanos, which probably not the best thing to happen for Ghost. My film reveals that Ava, not wanting to die, returned to crime to support herself. Eventually, she was captured by S.H.I.E.L.D. and imprisoned on the raft, kept in stasis so she wouldn't die. Iron Patriot, Ghost, and Simon Williams fight against the Masters of Evil. Halfway through the battle, Hulk shows up, except he isn't Hulk. He has red skin and is really, really hot, not sexy hot, fire powers hot. Confused, Rhodey accepts Red Hulk's help. As the battle for the raft rages on, the Master of Evils accidentally open up the most securely guarded cell in the raft. Inside the cell, they see a man with long blonde hair, wearing a golden costume with a blue cape. Instead of helping them, this man kills half the Hydra goons and breaks out of the raft, flying away. At the end of the battle, all the Masters of Evil are either gone or dead. Red Hulk has disappeared for some reason, and Ghost is unconscious because of her powers. Simon Williams tries to escape the prison, but stops on the roof because it's a prison flowing in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. You can't really leave without a helicopter. Rhodey meets him there, and Williams explains his backstory and that he isn't really a bad guy. S.H.I.E.L.D. agents swarm Williams, but Rhodey tells them to stand down. We cut to Rhodey yelling at Ross about keeping Williams and Starr prisoners instead of helping them out. Ross points out that they're criminals, and Rhodey yells at him that so are basically all of the Avengers, because of Ross. Rhodey convinces Ross to free the duo and takes them to Hank Pym. Pym fixes Starr, allowing her to use her abilities without dying. Pym also creates a containment suit for Williams that allows him to become human again. Also, Hank Pym says that Ant-Man and the Wasp are dealing with some unrelated stuff, so they can't help with the Masters of Evil problem, and that's a hand wave. Iron Patriot, Ghost, and Williams, now calling himself Wonder Man, set out to find the mysterious man who escaped the raft during the attack. Ghost and Wonder Man, over the course of the film, bond over their similarities, like losing control of their bodies and being imprisoned despite them not being really evil. The trio of superheroes end up finding the blonde man hiding in Central Park. Rhodey tries to approach him, but the man yells at him to stay back, saying that he can't control his powers. Rhodes asks him who he is, and the man says, "It's me, Rhodey, don't you remember me?" And then we find out the man's name. The Sentry. The Sentry is a character in the comics. The idea behind him is that he was this great, powerful, Superman-esque character in the Silver Age, who no one remembers because he has psychic powers and for some reason erased himself from their memories. And, hey, he's been in past Avengers movies, don't you remember, Riley?
I do not, no.
He's been in all the Avengers movies. He's been in half the movies in the MCU. It's just that everyone forgets that for some reason.
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
Sentry says that his memories are foggy, but he remembers being part of the Avengers. Rhodey says that he doesn't remember that. Sentry insists that he's been part of the team for years. Sentry mentions that he hurt the team, including Rhodey, and that he fought against Thanos. Sentry theorizes that, with his psychic powers, he erased everyone's memories of him, but he doesn't know why. Throughout the film, we actually see flashbacks of Sentry's scrambled memories. We see him flying through the sky in New York as the Chitauri invade. We see him fighting off Ultron drones. We see him flying up and holding up the moon on Titan. We see him fighting against Thanos in Wakanda. And for some reason, no one else remembers him being there. Rhodes asks Ross about the Sentry, and Ross explains that Damage Control found him lying unconscious outside the Avengers base after Endgame. We also found out that Rhodey did a little bit of research into Zemo's Masters of Evil. We found out that Falcon and Winter Soldier are currently tracking Zemo, and they don't think he was behind the attack on Congress. They point out that in Civil War, Zemo was calm and calculating, nothing like the man who attacked Congress was. Rhodes realizes that he's seen this kind of thing before in the third Iron Man movie. The fake Zemo is preying on people's fears as part of his plan, combining different elements of different villains to become the ultimate villain. He has Thanos' gauntlet and purple skin, he has Loki's crown, he has Zemo's name, he's leader of Hydra, his minions wield weapons of different villains. Whoever is in control of the Masters of Evil, they want the world to know them as a villain for some reason. We also find out that Rhodes had Pym run some blood tests on the bodies of the Masters of Evil killed at the Hydra base, and he learns that they were genetically modified to have increased strength and a healing factor. Finally, it's revealed that Ross is going ahead with the launching of the planetary's defense shield, which takes the form of 3 heavily armed satellites to shoot down alien ships. The Masters of Evil attack the first satellite launched, and the Dark Avengers, Iron Patriot, Wonder Man, Ghost, and the Sentry fight them off. The second satellite launch is also attacked, and the Dark Avengers fight off the Masters of Evil again, this time with help from Red Hulk. During the fight, Rhodes realizes the bad guy's plan and flies off, telling the team that the Masters of Evil aren't the real bad guys and that they need to stop the third satellite from launching. The Dark Avengers arrive at the third satellite launch to destroy it, but Red Hulk turns on them, teaming up with the Masters of Evil to ensure the satellite launches. Wonder Man, Sentry, and Ghost defeat Red Hulk, knocking him out and turning him back into his real form. Emil Blonsky, aka Abomination. It's revealed that, inspired by Professor Hulk, Ross did some new experiments on Blonsky, giving him extremis to make him stronger, resulting in his fire powers and new appearance. It's also implied that the reason that the Masters of Evil are so tough is because they have also had experiments with extremis on them. Iron Patriot confronts Ross, explaining Ross's plan to the audience. Ross wanted the planetary defense shield to launch, but he knew that Congress wouldn't support it. So he created a team of supervillains to kill congressmen who opposed him and create enough fear to justify his control, arming his minions with the weaponry of past villains that he acquired through his military connections. He had the Masters of Evil fight the Avengers and try to stop the satellite launches, because he knew that the Avengers would protect his project if they thought the bad guys were against it. The planetary defense satellites, as it turns out, are actually a revived version of Project Insight, the bad guy plan from Winter Soldier.
Mm-hmm.
Ross's plan isn't to kill any alien invaders. It's to kill anyone who he thinks is a danger to America. People like Bucky Barnes, Scott Lang, Bruce Banner.
Yep.
Mostly Bruce Banner. Rhodey asks who the Sentry is, and Ross coyly says that he's my ace in the hole. Rhodey tries to arrest Ross, but discovers that he is unable to move his arms. Ross reveals that, while he was researching past villains, he discovered that Vanko put a virus in the War Machine armor that allowed him to control it. As it turns out, that virus was never patched out. Ross, with his new minion Iron Patriot, flies to the third satellite launch. Sentry is about to smash the satellite, but he stops. His eyes turn white as Ross arrives, wielding the golden gauntlet with the orange stone. The satellite launches as Sentry and Iron Patriot beat up Ghost and Wonder Man. That's when the Sentry's backstory is revealed. The Infinity Stones were wielded by dozens of different men, each of whom imparted part of themselves into the stone. Vision, Iron Man, Hulk, Thanos, Ronan, Red Skull, Hawkeye, pieces of each's mind was imparted into the stones. Vision, who was fused with the Mind Stone for years, left the biggest influence, however. When Thanos used the stones to destroy the stones, he didn't actually destroy them. He reduced them to atoms. Atoms that, when Hulk and Iron Man used the Nano Gauntlet, were summoned to Earth where they coalesced into a humanoid form, the form of the Sentry. Inspired by Vision's memories, the Sentry decided to become a superhero. And that's how you get in, not the comic book, he erased everyone's memories, but you still get him having been a part of a bunch of movies. Because he was a part of them.
Right.
As the Infinity Stones, and he just doesn't remember that he was a rock collection.
Okay, yeah.
Ross reveals that although the Sentry is nowhere near as powerful as the real Infinity Stones, he's more than strong enough to protect the Earth, and that the Masters of Evil's attacks on the raft was an excuse to free him. The Orange Stone in Ross's gauntlet is an artificial soul stone created from the Sentry's energy as a way to control him. Sentry and Iron Patriot fight against Ghost and Wonder Man. Ghost ends up disarming Ross, freeing her teammates. Rhodey flies up to stop the satellite, but is stopped by the Sentry, who, despite being freed from Ross's control, still wants to beat up the Avengers. Sentry explains that he knows who he is now. He is the Infinity Stones. He is destruction. He is the Void. Wonder Woman breaks out of his containment suit, gaining the ability to fly, and battles Sentry in the sky. He tells Sentry that he doesn't have to be evil because Thanos was, and that he can make a change for the better and become a hero. Sentry defeats Wonder Man, but, swayed by his words, flies up and smashes the satellites. The Sentry flies away from Earth, leaving it to figure out who he wants to be. The film ends with Ross locked up in the raft, taunting Rhodey that the Avengers won't always be enough to save the world, and that the day will come when he will be proven right. And that is my pitch for my movie, The Dark Avengers. Thoughts?
I fucking love that. That was really cool. I kept thinking about the entire time, I'm like, does this fit into the MCU? And it really does. I like how you tied it into, so a lot of the stuff that, Marvel has quote-unquote forgotten about, like Emil Blonsky. The entire time I was like, oh yeah, Thunderbolt Ross is the Red Hulk. But no, it's the Abomination. I really did like how you brought it back to, no, Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross is the bad guy of this film. Because he's pretty much ends justify the means, my way or the highway type guy. I like that you tied it in to Iron Man and all the past Avengers and Sentry, and yeah, I really liked that a lot. It was really well introduced into the MCU. Yeah, it was really solid.
Also, I just realized that I called Simon Williams Wonder Woman like 15 times.
You did, but it was only like 3 or 4 times.
We're just going to ignore that.
Right, yeah. As soon as you said Nathan Fillion, and I go, he's going to talk about Wonder Man. They've been talking about introducing him for a while. So essentially your team of quote-unquote villains is Wonder Man, Ghost, War Machine, Sentry, Red Hulk. They're the Thunderbolts, essentially?
Well, that's interesting. Because I thought you would do the Thunderbolts, because that's, like, the obvious one.
Right.
So I decided, I'll do the Dark Avengers. And then you didn't do the Thunderbolts. But anyway, I was looking through it, and turns out Sentry was part of the Dark Avengers for a bit. And that basically inspired this.
Yeah.
Ghost's a part of the Thunderbolts. Wonder Man was a part of the Masters of Evil. I think Red Hulk's been part of a few teams. And obviously, the reason why there's so much War Machine focus is because the leader of the Dark Avengers was Iron Patriot. Not James Rhodes, but still.
Because typically when I think of the Masters of Evil, especially from the animated show a couple years ago, I think typically of, like, obviously the Masters of Evil versus the Avengers. But them against the Dark Avengers versus the Masters of Evil. That's a really fascinating concept, and I do like how well incorporated into the Marvel Cinematic Universe it is. I even thought to myself at one point, I was like, is he going to mention Falcon and Winter Soldier? Because Zemo is all there, and you mentioned Falcon and Winter Soldier a few points, and I'm like, yeah. I like how it's kind of like picking up the pieces of the MCU, not to say that the MCU is in pieces, but like picking up some forgotten parts of it that I feel like some of the Spider-Man movies lately have been doing. Like, they're saying, oh yeah, remember this? Remember Iron Man, how much of a dick he was? Yeah, well, he created this Spider-Man villain, and this technology that was used against Spider-Man. And in the vein of that, how you incorporated, like, certain elements of the MCU that are just there, but we don't talk about very much, and you're becoming relevant. So yeah, I really like that.
Looking at my recording timer and thinking about the fact that I edit this and don't want to edit a 2-hour podcast, because I have homework and shit, I think we should split this episode in half. And I say this after we've already discussed it off mic, but basically, we're going to end this episode here, and in 2 weeks, we are going to be doing our DC pitches, which we're going to be recording immediately after this, because that is easier, but it'll make continuity weird. Anyway, Riley, where can they find you?
You all can find me on TikTok and Instagram at Riley James Thorpe, and on YouTube at Riley Thorpe.
Also, check out The First Mag Train Out of Cleveland and Other Short Stories, available now on Amazon. It's a collection of sci-fi short stories I wrote. The ebook's only a few bucks. Go buy it. You can find me on Twitter at JARMESCASEY, Jarmes Casey at twitter.com. We'll be back next week on Monday, assuming we don't get murdered by Flag Smasher in the name of chaos. Next episode, we won't be doing a discussion, it's a review week, and we're going to be living in a gangster's paradise, because we're doing Sonic the Hedgehog.
Our first video game film adaptation.
As always, I'm Casey Jarmes.
And I'm Riley Thorpe.
And hey, it's just a movie. Don't lose your head about it, especially not to a ladder.